Good morning, everyone. Our webinar will start in just a couple minutes.
Do you want me to give you a copy for that?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michele Siqueiros. I am so excited to join you this morning. I'm president here at the Campaign for College Opportunity, and as a first-gen Latina college graduate, I'm blessed to have earned my master's degree at UCLA, and someone who needed to find and was grateful to find Latinx, Black, Asian American, and white faculty who supported and strengthened my educational journey. I'm thrilled to share the findings of our Still Left Out report and moderate this conversation on representation within the University of California leadership. So thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of you in this call, but just so you know, this webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel so that you can share it more broadly with your colleagues and friends. There's also going to be an opportunity for those of you in the audience to ask questions. So please place your questions in the Q&A section below and follow the discussion online by using our hashtag #StillLeftOut. Would love to hear who's on the call. So say good morning and tell us where you're joining us from. As you know, this morning we're going to dive into a critical issue, not just for our institutions, but really for the very fabric of our society. If we fail to address the disparities in leadership and representation at our universities and our community colleges, we really risk perpetuating a continued cycle of exclusion that truly undermines our values of democracy, of equity, of inclusion, and really harms potentially countless students who deserve to see themselves in their leaders. California is often proud and celebrates its diversity, and we must ensure that that pride isn't just talk, that what we feel and know is a strength of living in a multiracial state, especially in these times, is translated into equitable opportunities and experiences for the most diverse student body in higher education in our entire nation, if not the world. Our conversation today is rooted in vision and action, focusing on a 5-year journey of progress since our first groundbreaking report on this topic in 2018 called Left Out, which really laid bare the extent of underrepresentation in higher education leadership amongst our faculty, academic senate bodies, and university and college leaders. The Left Out report was a real wake-up call, highlighting the urgent need for diversity at the helm of our institutions and among all who work at our institutions. Today, we build on that foundation with our latest findings, and the title itself tells you that while we've made some progress, unfortunately, more diverse representation at our campuses is still left out. This report reveals that despite some of these strides forward that we have made, our leadership remains disproportionately white. This disparity does not reflect the rich diversity of California's population, which is 61% Latinx, Black, Asian American, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, and American Indian Alaska Native. I just want to say how grateful I am to our Vice President of Research, Dr. Vikash Reddy, who was the primary author of this report, with the support from David Drummer and our team of graduate research fellows. They knew that their research and the stakes are really high. Without diverse leadership, we really risk excluding and providing true equity to all talented staff, faculty, and leaders that can help serve as role models and counselors and guides to our students who are incredibly diverse. We also just would neglect the wealth of perspectives that can drive innovation in our state and understanding at a time when we need it more than ever. Our conversation today will explore these challenges and the steps we should take to create a more inclusive future at the University of California. Highlighting in this report, Still Left Out, we cover and uncover that quest for racial and ethnic equity in California's colleges and universities, and we know that we have a long way to go. This publication is a testament to our continued commitment here at the Campaign for College Opportunity to bringing to light the work that remains to be done in achieving representation that reflects the diversity of our society, that ensures that all talent, all perspectives are at the table, every table. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce another fellow Bruin, Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos is currently an undergraduate student at UCLA who previously transferred from Porterville College, and we are so thrilled that he can join us because he is going to share the findings of the Still Left Out report specific to the University of California. Thank you, Carlos, for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. My name is Carlos Rodriguez, and I'd like to begin by saying that I am many things. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school, a graduate of Porterville College, the son of Mexican immigrants, and a system-impacted first-year transfer student studying economics at one of California's most selective institutions, UCLA. As a first-generation college student, I'm grateful for having taken part in the UCDC program last quarter, interning with my hometown Congress member, David Valadeo, and having opportunities like this to speak about important issues of faculty and leadership diversity in higher education. My call to higher education and student leadership has always been to humanize the college experience, to make it feel like less of a machine so that California fully supports the students it's intended to serve. My goals have always been to help out students like myself who didn't have the support early on in college to see it as a legitimate option for them. 5 years ago, I was a freshman in high school, and I believed college was out of reach for me because I didn't have anybody advising me who came from similar backgrounds. I was almost left out. I've made it this far thanks to a strong support network that will live in my heart forever. While I was at Porterville, it was my custodial colleagues who never ceased to cheer me on and who advised me professionally and personally, even though it wasn't in their job description. It was my community college calculus professor, Miguel Ruelas, a UCLA alum, who walked me through the transfer process and made me feel welcomed at Porterville. He had the reputation of being invested in his students, and I experienced that firsthand. He's a first-generation Mexican-American and college grad from a working-class family, coming from a background very much like my own, with the same challenges related to money and experience navigating the college maze. He went above and beyond what was expected, and I would spend at least 10 hours a week with him in class and working with him during office hours to make transfer possible for me. He helped me envision what my life at UCLA and beyond would look like, which wasn't something anyone in my family could do, no matter how much they loved and supported me. Today, it's my transfer peer advisors that are guiding my UCLA experience. I'm not alone in that experience. Students of all walks of life make up the UC system. In 2021, over 60% of the UC student body were of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. 25% of students were Latinx, 4% were Black, and 35% Asian American and Native Hawaiian. But when we look at Latinx leadership throughout the UC system, we see a sore mismatch in representation in every leadership body except the Board of Regents. The share of Latinx leaders has decreased in all but faculty positions from 2017 to 2021. Even so, only 8% of tenured faculty and 7% of non-tenured faculty are Latinx at the UC. For Black students, we fortunately see strong representation in the Board of Regents and campus senior leadership, but this is tempered by stagnation in faculty and the academic senate, not progressing at all in this 5-year period. For Asian American and NHPI students, who make up the largest share of UC's student body, though compromising 50% of California's population, we see improvements on the Board of Regents and in campus senior leadership, but decreases in academic senate. Meanwhile, whites are significantly overrepresented in UC leadership. After 5 years, every category of leadership, from tenured and non-tenured faculty, statewide academic senate, and campus senior leadership, remains at least 50% white. The UC Board of Regents is by far the most racially and ethnically diverse leadership body within the UC, where half of the regents are either Latinx, Black, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. I've been a UC student for 2 quarters now, and I still have many questions and challenges as a first-generation transfer trying to navigate elite academic spaces through involvements and building community. My experience at UCLA has been a large departure from my time as a community college student at Porterville College, but my vision for students like myself would be to have a seamless experience where I can see myself reflected on campus. It feels like I have far more in common with my former coworkers, the custodians I worked alongside with at Porterville, than I do with my professors I've had at UCLA so far. Classes are so big, I hardly connect with my professors at a one-on-one level, and the culture shock I faced at the beginning of my time here was rough to adjust to when I was so used to the rich diversity of my community. Without the onboarding experience I had with the transfer summer program, I probably would not have any clue how to navigate campus, find tutoring for my classes, or have made the small circle of friends I now possess. Something surprising was apparent once the regular school year began, which was the striking differences in the racial makeup of my new school compared to my old one. I came from a system where 47% of students are Latinx to a system where only 25% of students are Latinx, and even less at more selective campuses. What does this mean for students navigating the UC system today? It means that we have fewer opportunities to connect with campus leaders and professors who look like us, to build mentorships with them that support us to succeed, and that our courses are more likely to be shaped without our experiences in mind. I think it also means that critical exchanges that push us forward aren't happening at the rates they should be. With diverse leaders, students are more likely to find someone who can answer their financial aid questions, guide them through selecting classes, and ensure students are on the road to timely graduation, all without judgment because they have trudged the path before. Education becomes more accessible to those with diverse backgrounds when people from those backgrounds are assisting the newer generations. With my first year at UCLA coming to a close, I recognize the immense value and benefits that diversity brings to our general student bodies, but importantly, to our faculty and leadership positions. More students can benefit from a coordinated system-wide effort to diversify UC leadership, especially when it comes to promoting equitable student success and closing racial equity gaps in higher education. The UC system has yet to reflect California's rich diversity and its student body makeup, as well as its members of leadership and faculty. UCLA prides itself on the legendary people of color they helped develop, like Jackie Robinson and the Nobel laureate Ralph Bunche. How will we produce the next generation of diverse history makers who will go on to produce wonders if students, faculty, and leaders of color continue facing exclusion in our higher education system? For myself, after defeating tremendous challenges, I am nothing short of grateful to be ending my first year at UCLA, launching a campaign running in the spring election to serve as the next transfer student representative at UCLA. Combined with my enriching experience in Washington, D.C., being able to speak in Sacramento, and relying on fellow transfers and staff mentors to build community with, I look forward to being the first in my family to get a bachelor's degree. I would urge the UC system and campus leaders to do everything they can to ensure opportunities for diverse faculty and leadership is a standard like what I had at the community colleges, not an exception that excludes many qualified and diverse professionals from positions at our prestigious universities. There are so many students who come from diverse backgrounds like mine that deserve a seat at the UC and deserve to have someone who looks like them reflected in our classrooms. You have the data, the research, and all the information you need to take action. 5 years later, one thing is clear: Black, Latinx, and underrepresented Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Californians are still left out, limiting our potential to strengthen our state's future. Thank you for your time.
Carlos, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing some of the key findings from this report. My team is going to be dropping the link to the Still Left Out report so that you all can review it. It is a real disservice to only share a few of the key findings, but we really wanted to engage in a conversation. And we're honored today to have two amazing leaders, Dr. Yvette Gullatt and Dr. Estela Bensimon, joining us to react to the findings in this report, and most importantly, to talk about the way forward. If you know the Campaign for College Opportunity, we don't just do research for research's sake. We do research, offer recommendations, engage leaders, and all of you that are here today with us to speak about the path forward. So Dr. Yvette Gullatt, thank you so much for joining us. You are Vice President and Vice Provost at the University of California and bring with you a wealth of experience. We will be dropping bios here in the chat because I want to just get started with our conversation. Dr. Estela Bensimon is nationally renowned for her work on equity, pushing for equity long before it was popular, and really doing trailblazing research. I am proud that she serves on the board of the Campaign for College Opportunity and is able to join us today. So with that, I just want to open it up to both of you, and maybe we can start with you, Dr. Gullatt. What was your reaction to what Carlos just shared, the key findings that he highlighted? And most importantly, I know you've read the full report, would just welcome your reactions and thoughts.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for having me this morning. It's a pleasure to hear from Carlos, and I wish you luck in your attempt to become the transfer student representative. A lot of what Carlos talked about resonated with my own experience. I was a transfer student to the University of California, Berkeley. It was a long time ago. And I will say the structures that he described did not exist for me. So I spent my first year in the library because I had no way of connecting with this university. The good news was I got all A's that first term, but the bad news was that I didn't have an experience at the university that I had hoped for. And so it's been my lifelong commitment that our students have that kind of experience. I'm happy to be a 3-time Berkeley alum, but I'm also mom and auntie to Bruins and Highlanders and Bobcats and Aggies and Anteaters who have all gone to the University of California. So with that, what stood out for me were a couple of things. The first is that building the faculty of the future is essential. And there is good news and bad news at the University of California, I think, and I hope Dr. Bensimon will speak to this, because it isn't, to be sure, the university faculty has become more diverse in the last 5 years than it had ever been. And I think a lot of the things that we have done to pay close attention to faculty diversity, to identify faculty in a lot of different ways, to expand the definitions of merit, if you will, from beyond the status quo to be more expansive of the types of institutions and the types of preparation that people bring, are laudable. At the same time, we're losing them as fast as we're getting them. And so a lot of the work in faculty diversity isn't just about bringing them into the institution, but it's the culture at the department levels that help them thrive and that help them stay in the mix. The other thing that struck me was the importance of the high touch that we invest in. The importance of high touch all along the pathways for students. He described the transfer center, the Center for Community College Partnerships, that is renowned nationwide for the kind of work it does. And I think the kinds of things that centers like that do, the ways that we tap into the lived experience of our students and our faculty and our leadership to help students thrive at the university is so critical. The problem is we don't have enough of them. And when we do have them, they have to find an environment that they find comfortable and supportive of them. So I want to thank Carlos for those for that. I also want to say, I think this is a state challenge. I appreciate that you found diversity amongst the faculty at the community colleges, but I think as a state, we have a once in a generation opportunity to grow our own faculty. And so at the university, we are seeking 40% of the future faculty start their careers or their educational experience at a community college, at a UC, at a CSU, at another HSI, at an HBCU or tribal college. We're going to be expanding by 1,100 faculty by 2030. And we have in our mix that we should have a faculty that reflects the lived experience. But drawing from a broader array of institutions is absolutely key. So thank you, Carlos, for your insights.
That's a great segue to you, Dr. Bensimon, because you've done so much work on how do you build the faculty that is inclusive and reflective of a student body. So first, would love your reaction to Carlos and the findings in this report, and then if you could speak to that particular point.
Thank you, Michelle, for inviting me. And it's a great report, as I've already told you and Vikash. And Dr. Gullatt, it's nice meeting you, and all of your comments resonate with what I know. So I want to pick up where Carlos left off. And Carlos, I also wish you well in your election. What Carlos spoke about, which were individuals, he mentioned specifically a faculty member at Porterville who helped him through the transfer process, completing the application, but more than that, having him imagine what his life would be like UCLA. And the reason why I want to pick up on this is because we can give it a name, what he described, and that is that he met an institutional agent who used his knowledge and his power to help Carlos be successful. And this is a skill. It's a competency, but when we interview faculty for positions, that's not something we explore. We don't say, is this candidate likely to become or to be an institutional agent? Because we don't know what questions to ask that candidate. So unless we develop a concentration of institutional agents, people who are not as lucky as Carlos will continue to get lost. And so we have to clone that individual. And in the research that I have done amongst STEM faculty in Colorado and other places, it's the same thing. You ask the students what helped you, and it's always an individual. It's either a faculty member or peer mentors. So what I would say that if the UC system is going to hire 11,000 more.
1,100.
1,100, sorry. More faculty members, that's got to be a criterion that the individual exhibits the characteristics of an institutional agent. I would also say that I don't know anything about the background of the faculty member that Carlos mentioned, but one of the things that prevents us from diversifying the faculty is our inclination to uphold very traditional standards of academic competency, where you went, what university did you go to? And the UC system, I'm not sure that they would necessarily hire individuals whose degrees are from historically Black institutions or that started out their education in a community college. So those prestige markers are very, very, are a big obstacle. And part of the reason for that is because minoritized people, like Dr. Gullatt, who you went to Berkeley, but you transferred to Berkeley. But most faculty of color, or most doctorates of color, start out their education often in student affairs, or their degree is not a PhD, it's in an EDD, like mine. And that becomes an obstacle also to being considered a worthy or meritorious candidate. The prestige of the degree. And then, things like having received awards. So there's a whole bunch of criteria that are racialized and that ensures the continuation of whiteness. As we said in our report, Whiteness Rules, which is about the selection of the presidents. But for instance, UCLA and Berkeley are both looking for new presidents. And if you look at the description of those positions, you can see how those descriptions advance or continue to promote, very traditional credentials and experiences. So what I'm saying is that if a candidate comes along and describes being an institutional agent for students as one of his experiences, I'm not sure that it will be taken as seriously as it could. So my message here is let's make institutional agents a criterion for faculty positions and also administrative positions.
Thank you,
May
Dr.
I-
Ben-Simon.
May I add to your commentary, Dr. Ben-Simon? When we think about the backlash against diversity, equity, inclusion across the country, a lot of that has been focused on the use of what we call a contributions to diversity statement. And that contributions to diversity statement is, in fact, the attempt for faculty to describe to us, or prospective faculty, how they would serve as an institutional agent. If you don't think that backlash is intentional, it's to create a division between the kind of work we actually believe in very strongly and what the institution is able to do. So I just want to reinforce that our attempt to diversify our faculty is grounded in expanding our faculty tenure and promotion policies to include the kind of community engaged scholarship and public service that many faculty of color invest in, and that is their interdisciplinary identity. And at the front end, to ask our faculty, how will you serve? The diversity statements are not about your diversity. They are about how you will serve a diverse population. And the fact that they are so under attack, I think, speaks to how centered whiteness and a status quo is. And it is incredibly hard to push against. So I appreciate what this report has done to lift that.
Yeah, and I really love that. Dr. Ben-Simon, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate that, you're affirming, right, what is sometimes taken and politicized, right, a diversity statement without the context. I don't think that anyone, Republican or Democrat or unaffiliated, would say that you shouldn't have a professor or faculty member that can't work well with students. And so how do we maybe take ownership of our wording without letting folks kill the wording, and not just kill the wording, but kill the actual action that does need to happen, which is that we do need faculty that can effectively work with students. And in California, to be effective at working with students, you better be effective at working with Latinx students, with Black students, with Asian American students, with Native students, with white students, with low-income students, right? So, Dr. Bensimon, I loved how you kicked off, we need to clone institutional agents. And, you know, the University of California is the top research university of the world. So if there's cloning happening, it's definitely happening at the University of California. But we know that that's not where you were going with that. You talked about non-traditional requirements. Dr. Gullatt, you added, right? That's exactly what we're trying to do by highlighting community engaged scholarship and valuing that. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the practices and efforts? You know, I think it is distressing on when we share some of these key findings on the faculty front. We do see some improvements, not sufficient. But what's also happening in terms of administration? And can you speak about academic senate bodies, which is an area we've been hugely concerned about? Those bodies determine admission standards. They determine, you know, course requirements, scheduling. They are at the very core of what the institution will present to students. And those bodies are the most lacking in representation and inclusion.
Sure. So as we've said, you know, who the faculty are is going to play a large role in who's in the leadership and definitely who's in the Senate in a shared governance environment. So I think we have to go back to diversifying the faculty, but we also have to consider what it means to be in service, right? So there are lots of ways to serve in higher education. Does service in the Senate benefit you in your profession, right? And so I think that there's a lot that we need to understand about the incentives and the motivations of faculty who are primarily judged on their research. And if they're going to do service, where do they do that service that best feeds their soul and feeds their research, right? It may not be the Senate. It may not be the Senate. And so that's something I think to look more closely with. But in terms of diversifying the faculty, you know, one of the things that we do is really supports prospective faculty in that interim period, right? Between the time that you finished your graduate program and before you begin your first ladder rank position in our President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, which is an extraordinary program that brings future faculty across all kinds of disciplines, those who are going to contribute to the diversity of our scholarship and who are themselves contributing to the diversity of our campuses. And that supportive program, which trains and teaches and supports people to land that first job and includes a hiring incentive, has led to what I would say is a huge amount of the diversity that we're seeing on our campuses, because we are actually supporting those individuals to and through. And the way that we're supporting them is leading to 99% of them who go up for tenure get it, right? And that's really, really important. Another thing as we think about diversifying the faculty, and I want to go back to the focus on institutions that produce high quality people to populate our faculty ranks, are our HBCU and our HSI doctoral diversity initiatives. These are programs where we're bringing undergraduates to the University of California for research opportunities, right? And then we're mentoring them as they apply to graduate school. And then if they come to the University of California as a graduate student, they are going to get a fellowship that is going to take them through the entirety of their time in graduate school. So we can eliminate some of the barriers that exist for people to pursue graduate education. And then they're going to go off to be faculty. And, you know, as you know, becoming a faculty member takes a long time. We're seeing the first of those people becoming faculty members at UC and CSU. The same thing for our HSI initiative. And what's important about the HSI initiative is it allows us to tap into the great wealth of universities here in the state that are supporting our students. And so we're seeing faculty coming through these programs. But again, it's a long process. You don't become a faculty member as an undergraduate, right? You become a faculty member. You start that process in high school and earlier than that. So we have to invest in the kinds of supports, and it is a high touch support because you're battling so many things that are working to undermine people's progress. And so creating those structures, identifying people, broadening our notions of merit, broadening the institutions from where we are drawing individuals, recognizing the role, for example, of family and how people make decisions about graduate school. One of my favorite, if I have a moment, one of my favorite projects out of our HBCU was at one of our campuses. It was a research study in atmospheric science. And the following year, they asked for a lot more money. And we said, well, why are you asking for so much more money? And they said, well, because we have learned that if you're going to bring students from HBCUs in the South to UC Davis in atmospheric science, you need to bring their families. They need to understand and accept and endorse this. And I thought that was an important learning for our faculty, that decisions that are made by people of color are not made in the same way. Those are the kinds of learnings we need to develop a future faculty, but most importantly, broaden our definition of where merit exists, how it exists, and where it comes from. And that's the commitment in the 1100 and coming from HSIs, community colleges, CSUs, HBCUs, and tribal institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Gullatt, for talking
Michele,
about.
if I could.
Yes, of course.
Dr. Gullatt mentioned the initiatives around Hispanic serving identification. So I know that UCLA has been pressing really hard to become an HSI. Now, the question that I would ask is that mentioned in the announcement for the presidential search? So if it's not mentioned that UCLA is attempting to become a Hispanic serving institution and values that, I think it's a real problem, because it means that even from the beginning of the search, the HSI identity is being hidden, and it's now being used as a criterion for the candidates. I mean, it would seem to me that if UCLA is trying to become an HSI, one of the questions of potential candidates would be to ask them how they would lead a Hispanic serving institution, and in what ways that might be different from a mainstream Anglo-centered leadership. So that's one thing that I would say. The other thing is that I looked to see who was the search committee, and I don't know who they are, but I do know who's missing from that search committee. If you want to diversify leadership or faculty, you need to have individuals in those search committees that know the culture, they know what's critical equity mindedness. And I'm not sure that those individuals are in the search committee. So what will happen is that there will be search committee members that might make statements, expectations that are totally anti-equity, but there's no one there to interrupt them.
May I speak to that? Because
yes,
I can't speak to the job description for UCLA. I don't recall it offhand, but I will speak to your very important question about bias, right? Because I think that's what you're referring to. So in 2020, we took a look at our chancellor search policies and we revised them. And we've revised them so that the faculty play a critical role in determining who advances to the search process. But we supplemented that very important review with much more stakeholder input. so that we were hearing from a broader array of constituents, stakeholders for that campus, those campus communities, and that chancellor. The second thing that we have done since the last round of chancellor searches and the president search is embed an equity advisor into our search processes. And this is someone who orients our search members, many of whom, you know, are from alumni groups or other kinds of stakeholder communities, into the university's policies around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to conduct a bias-free and equitable search. So there is someone who is in those search processes to interrupt what are pretty common biases that may be subtle. I mean, we're not talking about overt racism here, but we are talking about things like status quo bias and confirmation bias, right? Those individuals also work with the chair and the search advisory consultant, so the companies that the campuses have, to make sure that the questions that are asked are bias-free. And then in the debriefing and discussion of candidates, that those discussions are not insertions of bias. So what that means is that we do what we can in the process, in the moment, to interrupt that bias, so that every candidate has an equitable shot, and that the search committee itself is diverse, recognizing that it has certain statutory requirements for who's there, but that our search consultants are making a broad swath and looking very broadly for applicants. So I can't speak to the language of the position description, Dr. Bensimon, because I don't have it in front of me, but I do think that there are efforts underway to make that search process much more equitable, and we do have our chancellor search policies on our website.
Thank you. I wanted
I guess
to.
it didn't work so well at Berkeley, right? I said that Berkeley has just appointed a new chancellor, and it's another white male.
Yeah, and
so
I'm just getting that announcement. But you know, to be what his lived experiences, what he brings to the table might be a benefit. You know, it doesn't necessarily deflect from what his leadership will bring.
I agree with you totally, and that we should not only think about the racial ethnic background of the candidates, but we also need to think about their racial literacy and their ability to act from an equity-minded perspective. I totally agree with you on that. But the thing is that when you look at the UC system, historically, from the very beginning, their tendency has been to appoint white males. UCLA, since its founding days, which is over 100 years ago, has never had a chancellor that was not white and male.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and until Janet Napolitano, we had not had a woman, and until President Drake. And so, yes, 150 years is a long time. And, you know, as those of us who do equity work, you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. It's never a straight path. And, you know, but we're always trying to learn from what we do and keep moving forward and keep making progress. And so I would hope in Chancellor Designate Lyons, we have someone with cultural competency, someone who knows how to espouse and live equity and opportunity, and that we will all stand to challenge and support him in his in living that in his chancellorship, and in that advocating for those values at the university.
Yeah, Dr. Bensimon, I appreciate you, you know, sharing that news of the appointment of Dr. Rich Lyons as the new chancellor of UC Berkeley, and really being unapologetic about highlighting the very real data. And I think we all agree on this call, and certainly we have pushed. We need racially competent, racial equity competent allies in every position.
That's right.
And those folks come in every single color and of every single ethnicity. And so, you know, I think it is also equally important to point out, right, as a UCLA alum, you know, I am hopeful that UCLA will look at ensuring that the talent that is out there, that is not just white male talent, is truly considered for a position to lead that university. So thank you for that. And Dr. Gullatt, I just want to say I really appreciate so much of what you have shared in terms of the broadening intentional strategies to be more inclusive in hiring and in partnerships. I heard a lot about partnerships, community college partnerships, partnerships with HBCUs, partnerships with HSI institutions, and really building on partnerships, because I think we know, right, we cannot do this work alone. Estela, I want to go to some of the questions that are popping up in the Q&A, and I invite everybody who's joining us today to drop additional questions. I believe we've answered the third one now. But you know, a lot of times when we talk about all of these strategies, what I hear from college leaders is like, well, it's a pipeline problem, right? We've got to build the pipeline, which I don't disagree with. We have to build the pipeline. But maybe if you can talk about David Tanner's question here. You spoke about how the term merit often means having the qualities and experiences of whiteness. What are some real better ways to measure and talk about actual merit rather than just markers of white upper middle and middle class norms? And I think you've shared some of those already. You've talked about student affair engagement, maybe how we value PhDs over EDDs, how we value students that haven't transferred from a community college, but maybe went straight to Harvard and then Princeton in order to recruit them. Talk to us more, Dr. Bensimon, about other ways to look at merit, as if merit is an objective term. I always love having that conversation.
You know, I think that if you're a white male and you are a faculty member, I would say that merit would be demonstrated by things like the withdrawals from your course by race and ethnicity, and why, right? Or so that's one market. Another one would be how many Latinx or Black students have you mentored to go on to graduate school? How many have you included in your lab or in your research projects? So those are, to me, markers of merit that are related to equity. It's using your position, your power, to advance not the students have already been advanced, but to be willing to take the C student in your science course and make them into an A student. So that's what I would say. Also, another marker of merit would be, how do you, through your syllabus and through other instructional activities, make your course one in which Carlos will be able to see himself. And a lot of faculty members do not think about it this way. How do you make your classroom culture one of affirmation and one of a success for minoritized students? You know, Bell Hooks said, the classroom is the most radical space for opportunity. And I would say, take that quote to heart and ask yourself, how do I make my classroom a radical space for opportunity for individuals like Carlos and like maybe you once were, Michelle? So that's what I mean by merit.
Yeah.
May
love that.
I add to that?
Can I add a question
Sure,
then
sure, of course, go ahead.
Because I do want to get to the next one, because we are talking about sort of definitions to attract, but we also want to retain. And Dr. Gullatt, you talked about about retention and creating welcoming environments for students. That's true for faculty in order to keep them. So maybe if in adding to what Dr. Bensimon just shared, you can address that question as well.
Sure. I wanted to add to Dr. Bensimon's remarks about transforming the classroom, right? So if the University of California is bringing the best and brightest students to its classrooms, and if I don't remember, Carlos, if you said what your major is, but if Carlos wanted to be a neurobiologist, he ought to have an experience that leads him to neurobiology. We shouldn't have classroom experiences that cause him to leave that field, right? And so we have to look at the unit of the classroom, and we have to examine those classroom practices and transform them and remove barriers like how many times you can take a test, barriers like asking students to form themselves into study groups, which will lead to the exclusion of Black and Brown students in many cases, right? The general things you think about life in the classroom that could actually be examined again and reframed. And I think one of the values of becoming Hispanic serving on many of our campuses is the opportunity to put that equity lens into the classroom, to see why is it that students who started out so strong end up in different majors, right? What are we doing along the pathway of the course curriculum, the sequence, to make sure that they are actually thriving there and not stepping out? The department is the unit of measurement, I think, for faculty faculty retention and faculty belonging. There's a lot you can do at the university around work-life balance, around protecting time for research, around supporting faculty to get to tenure. But life in that department has to feel like you belong. And I think that there's a lot to be done in that space with faculty of color. And so we do exit surveys and look at that experience. And so what we have invested in at the university is funding for departments to examine their practices that might be resulting in how in faculty leaving. One of those has been with the AAAS and the Sea Change Initiative, to look at the department level. So how are you supporting faculty of color? How are you bringing them in? How are you retaining them? And how are they thriving?
I love that. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to invite Carlos back into the conversation. Carlos, you heard both Dr. Bensimon and Dr. Gullatt respond to the findings and your experience. What's your response to what you've been listening to so far? What some reactions you'd love to share?
Yeah, I really love Dr. Bensimon's just remarks about like institutional agents and like the value of like making it a part of the process to hire somebody who's competent in the system or like at the specific school that they're working for. I was actually able to take part of a transfer summer program, which, helped with the onboarding process. They showed me how rigorous UCLA is going to be. They really prepared me for the first quarter, helped lessen that culture shock. And the only reason why I knew about it is because my calculus professor, Miguel Ruelas at Porterville College, had done the program in the 80s. I didn't receive an email to sign up for the program for the summer. He was just like, hey, check if they're still doing that program. I did, and luckily I was able to take part. But just that skill of knowing exactly what's going on, how minority students can take advantage of certain resources on campus, how to just provide a supported experience so that they have the same opportunities that other students have for granted, and just I think it's going to be really important going forward to hire people with that competence and with that in mind of just UC and UCLA are research focused. I see that I only have access to my professor 2 hours office hours and in class, but especially if we want to be in a Hispanic serving institution, we have to serve in general. And so Yeah, just since I've come here,
Love
I've
that.
I've just seen I've seen how, you know, students can sometimes not be the focus. And, I'm coming from an institution, California's community college system. It's all about the students. Now that I'm at UC, hey, it's about the research and the students,
Yeah.
sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. UCLA is awesome. But
Dr. Gullatt,
yeah,
could you speak to that, Carlos? Is raising an incredibly good point, right? It's about the culture, the environment, and two of the folks in the Q&A are asking, how can the UC support a culture of mentorship, right? For students, but also for faculty and other leaders. And how do we make sure transfer students like Carlos, right, can navigate what is sometimes a really confusing or lonely system, right? If
Yeah.
they can't figure out, where their communities are.
Yeah. So I think the vision is that everybody could serve that purpose. Right now, it is programmatic, right? And so the program you talk about, and I hope that was Santi and all of those folks at UCLA, the academic achievement division, right? Alfred Herrera, all of these people, right? There's this whole network of people across the system who are in place to help guide students. And so what's important is that investment remain in those programs, right? We need to continue to invest in the summer programs, the multicultural centers, the things that are actually under attack in many other states. We certainly don't want them to come under attack here because they reflect the identities, lived experiences, and the needs of our students. But ultimately, I want Carlos to walk into any faculty member's office and have that experience. And so that's the challenge in front of us, is that the water needs to be about that competency, right? And that right now, what we can do is invest in programs and invest in people, and invest, honestly, Dr. Bensimon, we have a whole bunch of PhDs and EDDs in student affairs because they don't want to leave the students. They don't want to make that transition so that they're less available to students. And it's actually, I'd love to see them in the faculty, but they see that the faculty doesn't provide that kind of opportunity. And so they're in student affairs or equity affairs. So the goal is that everybody can do that. But for now, I'm so proud of the people we have across the system in transfer centers and multicultural centers, student-initiated outreach, EAOP and EOP and Mesa and Puente and all of these places that are there to guide and hold you and develop those programs. But ultimately, it's got to be a system, because to your point, we can be Hispanic enrolling, and we're good. We're doing that. But we have to be Hispanic serving, and that means transforming the way you experience the water of the university. So we should, go ahead.
And the Hispanic serving should translate to Hispanic graduating.
Exactly.
So appreciate that so much. And thank you, Carlos, for sharing your good perspective. We just dropped in the chat a spotlight that we did on Yolanda Copeland Morgan from UCLA, previously retired, who talked about putting your money where your mouth is. And I think that's everything that you just shared, which is investing in the programs that we know support students, investing in programs that do ensure that we have agents for students everywhere. And certainly if there was ever case to be made to clone someone, Alfred Herrera would be top of the list. There's not a single transfer student at UCLA that's not been touched by that man and his team and the incredible work that they have done. And so glad that center is thriving beyond his leadership. I do want to just thank each of you for joining us today, everybody who participated in this webinar, for your great questions in the chat. This is a continued conversation. We want to share the findings and share solutions, get better about our language, as we ensure that no matter how much diversity, equity, inclusion is attacked nationally or politicized, that we continue to center students in this work, that we will always be about students, and that we have to be as inclusive and engaging. And I love institutional agents for students in all of our solutions. So thank you so much, Dr. Bensimon, for joining us, Dr. Yvette Gullatt, for your work and leadership at the University of California. And thank you, Carlos, of course, for speaking about your experience and sharing everything that has made you a student leader and advocate for everyone else. And to all of you, thank you so much for joining us, engaging in this conversation and pushing your institutions. This is the first of 3 webinars that we are hosting to share some of the findings and, more importantly, to communicate about the actions that we can take to ensure support success for students of all backgrounds at our institutions. The next conversation is a week from today at 10 a.m. We will focus on the California community colleges and findings from Still Left Out, reflective of that. And the following Wednesday, April 24th at 10 a.m., we will share findings from Still Left Out, focused on the Cal State University system. So my team has dropped registration links in the chat, so you can sign up for those. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Most of all, thank you to the incredible team here at the Campaign for College Opportunity for the great research, the great coalition building, the great advocacy work that you continue to do on behalf of students in California. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Goodbye.